sunshine inside, where we have Rajni LaRocca, who we are so happy to have here with her debut, Midsummer's So this is a novel written for a middle grade audience and enjoyed by those somewhat older people who like well-written creative literature. And there's a bonus in this story because there's a nod toward classic literature, as the book is a contemporary retelling of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. Midsummer's Mayhem is set in the small Massachusetts town of Comity, a historic town, that's C-O-M-I-T-Y, an historic town which holds the roots of famous authors and philosophers who like to walk and think in its many-acred woods. So that may remind you of something you've seen around here. The protagonist of the novel is 11-year-old Mimi. She loves to bake, and she also enjoys pondering while walking the trails of the town forest. One day she comes across a part of the woods that she does not recognize, and that's where the adventure really begins. I'm going to let Rajni tell you what she was thinking about as she walked through the woods that day. Midsummer's Mayhem has early readers, which includes booksellers, reviewers, and others in publishing, all abuzz. And I know she is too modest to say this, so I'm going to bang the drum and sing the praises of what people are saying. Rajni has just returned from Book Expo, which is a book trade conference in New York City, at which her novel was recognized as one of 10 Indies Introduce Outstanding Books by Debut Authors. So she was in a room full of, I don't know, maybe 300 booksellers. And people were talking about this book. Everybody wants it on their shelves when it officially comes out, actually on June 11th. So this is a sneak peek that you're all getting today. She's also going to be a featured author at the American Booksellers Association's Children's Institute Conference, which will happen in Pittsburgh at the end of this month. And a starred review in Kirkus calls Midsummer's Mayhem a delectable treat for food and literary connoisseurs alike. Rajni LaRocca was born in India, raised in Kentucky, and moved north to attend Harvard, where she earned both her BA and MD. She works as a primary care physician, loves to bake, and somehow finds time to write. She lives here in Concord with her family, and she's attended Kidlit events here. We've watched her through the years, welcomed her as she shopped with and for her family, and kind of have been on the sidelines watching this, hearing it's a book, it's a real book, it's coming, and here it is today for us. So we're really happy to have Rajni here behind the podium. Please help me give her another very warm welcome.
Thanks so much, Dawn. And thank you to everyone who's come here from very near and very far to celebrate with me. It is like so wild to see so many people from different parts of my life all together in one room. It's like getting married, only you're like marrying a book. But as you know, those of you who write, or maybe even those of you who don't write, know like nobody does this alone. So a lot of this is just thanking you guys for being who you are. I thought that I would talk a little bit about how I and Midsummer's Mayhem got to be here, and intersperse a few passages from the book as I talk, and then leave some time at the end for questions. So if I call your name, you have to wave, okay? You don't have to stand up, but you at least have to wave and acknowledge who you are. So, as my parents can attest, I have always loved books. As a kid, I read novels and nonfiction and comic books and comic strips and fortune cookies and cereal boxes. And believe it or not, I read Shakespeare. Shakespeare plays, at least one a year from 5th grade through the end of high school. And I also loved to write. As an only child, books were often some of my best friends. But when I wrote essays and letters by hand to people who read them most of the time, and poetry and short stories and even plays through middle school and high school. But my first ambition was always to be a doctor. So in college, I was a pre-med government major who managed to take a lot of English classes. I kept writing, but pretty much confined myself to assignments and personal essays. And then I went to medical school, and at least one of my med school classmates I see right there, right, Anne? Yeah, and I don't know if Jeff is here, but when you go to medical school, It's like learning the hardest science of your life while also learning a new language and while trying to learn how to listen, like really, really listen to people so that you can help them. So I didn't write much then either, except kind of medical notes, which are horribly boring. And I helped run our second year show, a musical production called Thoracic Park, which was, which definitely dates me, but it was awesome, and it was really fun and collaborative. And then came residency, during which I learned so much, but I was often working 100-hour weeks and barely saw my living room and barely saw my husband. Shortly after that, we had our first child, and that's like a whole new level of busy. That's like being on call every night. And then I started working as a primary care doctor, and we had our second baby. So writing pretty much stopped. So I want to read you the opening paragraph from MIDSUMMER'S Mayhem. The song from the woods first called to me on a bright June morning while I sat on the back porch swing rereading my favorite cookbook. I could only hear a few notes, a small taste of a half-remembered melody that meandered through the air, but I was instantly hungry to hear the whole thing and discover where it came from. I crossed the yard and stopped at the edge of the woods. As the music drifted toward me like an irresistible aroma, I held my breath and stepped into the trees. So that's my main character, Mimi, being called by something mysterious, but it's something that also seems strangely familiar. And that was me with writing. So in 2011, my kids were in school, my medical practice was established, and I felt the call to do something creative again. And so I took some classes online, and I figured out during taking classes that I wanted to write novels for kids because those were the books in my life that had the biggest influence on me. And so I started to think about ideas for a book. So I had this memory from my childhood. So my dad, wave, Dad, there you go. He didn't travel much, but when he did travel, he was sometimes gone for up to a week. And I, having an overactive imagination, began to wonder, what if the person who came back wasn't actually my dad, but somebody who looked exactly like him? Like, how would I know? So I had like a series of tests, like things that only my dad would know. And luckily it was always him. But then when it came trying to write a story, I was like, well, what if there was a girl whose dad came back from a trip and was acting really weird, and she was the only one who noticed? How would that happen, and what would happen next? Then I thought about imaginary friends, which I always thought was just a really cool idea. And then I thought, what if there were an imaginary friend who was actually real? And then, inspired by the woods of Concord, where I walk my dog every day, I thought about what kind of imaginary friend might live there. And that's when I harkened back to my childhood reading of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and two very specific lines, which I will not tell you now because it's a spoiler, so read the book, that would link to the Indian American family that I was creating in my story. And then I had the broad outline of the whole story. But I still didn't know how to write it. Like, just because you love books and you know how to read books doesn't mean you know how to write a story. So I drafted this book in 2014, and I revised it over 2015 and 2016. And I started querying agents in 2017, and then I entered a contest called Pitch Wars, where unagented authors apply to be mentored by more experienced authors. And I somehow got in, and I had an incredible mentor who made some amazing suggestions in an edit letter, which required eliminating a character from my book. So I basically rewrote the book in 2 months. And then, directly because of that, I signed with my amazing agent in November 2017, and we sold this book in 2018, and here we are today. So, A Midsummer Night's Dream, the play, is about conflict. It's about conflict between a daughter and her father over whom she should marry. It's about conflict between two friends who used to be as close as sisters, but jealousy gets in the way. Jealousy over a guy, of course. And conflict between the king and the queen of the fairies, who are fighting over a changeling boy. So the play makes us think about who we love and why, and what loyalty means and what it costs. But it's all wrapped up in this confection of an adventure told in gorgeous language with magic, mischief, and mayhem in the woods, where people emerge transformed. And so, Midsummer's Mayhem is a riff on that tale of mortals caught up in a fairy fight. And although there are fantastical characters in my story, there are lots of them, it's really about the 11-year-old girl, Mimi, who is struggling to understand her place in her family and in the world. I tried to channel the humor and the whimsy of Shakespeare's play while centering it on a real-world kid with familiar real-world problems that get even more complicated when magic gets mixed in. So in *Midsummer's Mayhem*, Mimi is 11, and she has 3 teenage siblings who are super talented in different ways. Henry, the oldest, is an amazing musician, singer, and actor. He's a little bit dramatic. The oldest sister, Rhea, is an incredible dancer and singer. Jules, the second sister, is a virtuoso drummer and a star soccer player. And Mimi feels left out and forgotten. They go next door to meet the teenage boy who's just moved into what used to be Mimi's best friend's house. And here, I've included a little love note to the fictional town of Comedy, which might remind you of a place around here. So in the Concord Bookshop in Concord, Massachusetts, I have to talk about this. Jules scrunched her shoulders. "Welcome to Comedy, the hometown of the talented and famous." "What does that mean?" Cole asked, reaching for a third brownie. "We may seem like just an ordinary town outside of Boston," said Rhea, "but dozens of famous people are from here, starting with the Revolutionary War hero George Babbitt. And the philosopher David Allen Trudeau," said Henry. "And Teresa Lee Falcott, the writer," said Jules. "And loads of others, including last year's winner of American Diva." "Fascinating," said Cole. "Maybe I won't miss San Diego after all." I rolled my eyes. They'd forgotten to mention the most important famous person from Comedy, Puffy Fay. He was the best pastry chef in the country. He'd written my favorite cookbook, and he hosted a baking competition on Food TV. But before I could say anything, Henry asked, "Do you play an instrument? My band's looking for a bassist." I didn't need to hear the saga of Henry's band again, so I wandered to a swing, sat, and inhaled the sharp smell of the woods. There were several acres back there, and a creek that flowed southeast to join the Schaghticoke River. Emma and I loved roaming the woods all year round, but especially in the summer, when sunlight filtered through the leaves, washing everything in shades of green, and the forest was filled with the sounds of twittering birds. We climbed trees, waded into the creek, and sat in our hangout for hours telling each other stories about secret forest creatures. Sometimes I could swear I heard the woods talking to me, coaxing me to stay longer. I hadn't had the heart to go there since Emma left, but after hearing that song, I knew I had to. So, just like in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is set in both Athens and the unnamed mysterious woods behind it, *Midsummer's Mayhem* is set in the charming New England town of Comedy and the mysterious Comedy woods where strange things are afoot. And by the end of the book, you will understand why so many famous people come from Comedy. So Mimi goes to a new local bakery and meets the beautiful and slightly odd owner, Mrs. T. She finds out that they're holding a kids' baking contest, and she wants so badly to win it. But her dad, who is a food writer and usually helps her with the recipes, is acting really weird, eating everything in sight and unable to tell the difference between delicious and disgusting food. So Mimi has to try on her own, and she fails terribly. The writers in this room can understand what I'm talking about. So terribly that she thinks about giving up on her dream of winning the contest and on her dream of becoming a professional baker. And then she meets a boy in the woods named Vic, and he changes everything. Mimi and Vic find exotic baking ingredients and herbs and spices in the woods, and they bake with them. And then things get a lot weirder in Mimi's home and in Comedy. Mimi has to figure out what's going on and how to fix it, including what's wrong with her dad. And she needs to do it all while still trying to win that baking contest and impress her celebrity chef idol. So that's the central conflict of the story, and along the way, there's a lot of baking. So I'm going to read one more passage, but before that, I just want to thank some people specifically. First, my parents, Chakravarti and Kasturi Narasimhan. Please wave. They're right here. They raised me with love and the most delicious food in the world, so how could I not be inspired? And they really made me believe that I could do anything, and they let me read anything and everything I wanted at any time, including at the table. Thank you to Ann Herons, yay, my med school roommate and one of my best friends in the world, for demystifying baking to me and creating the baking monster that you see today. Thank you to Elaine Demopoulos, who taught a class on the novel in progress at Grub Street that was so good that it made me believe that I could finish the first draft of this novel, and I did. Thank you to my critique partners, Allison Goldberg, Sharon Abrahanen, there you go, where's Allison, and yay, and Haley Barrett, Shannon Foxen. There are many others, but these are the four that read so many endless iterations of this novel and had patience with me through all of it, and helped me make it the best it could be. And is Teresa Milstein here? Anyway, she read something, she was a beta reader at the very end. It really, really helped. I need to thank my agent, Brent Taylor, who has just been such a fantastic champion for this novel from the very beginning. He read it in like 3 hours and was like, I love it. I am so impressed with somebody who knows what he likes when he sees it and just isn't afraid to say so. And this book's great success today is in large part because of all the work that he did. My husband, Lou, has been my very best friend since we were 18 years old, and my constant source of support in everything. And I really couldn't do anything without him, without his love and his help. And he's endlessly inspiring to me, and his love fills me with strength. So, almost there. Okay, so for my children, to my children, Joe and Mira, who really did inspire all 4 siblings in this book. They amaze me with their brilliance and their perseverance, and who always believe in me, even when I don't feel like I can believe in myself. Sorry. You prove every day that magic is all around us, especially in people that we love. So, okay, so I'm just going to read one final passage. So let me set the stage. Mimi has just tried to advance to the next round, get into the first round of the baking contest with cookies that she thought were great. But the owner of the While Away, Mrs. T, rejects them as being not special enough and not coming from her heart. So a mean girl, Kira Jones, has already owned this golden leaf and gotten into the next round of the contest, and this really hurts Mimi. And although she still loves baking, she's thinking about quitting since she really thinks that she's never going to be good enough at it. When we finally reached home, I went straight to my room and took a long look around at the lavender-colored walls with black butterflies, the bookcases under the windows that held all my cookbooks and baking magazines. I loved to bake, but was I doomed to be terrible at it? I opened my closet and reached into a dusty corner where I'd stowed shoes I'd outgrown and extra poster board for school projects. I pulled out my clarinet case, which stared at me accusingly, and my old dance shoes, still shiny and unscuffed. My soccer cleats were tiny and barely used. Maybe I should cram all my cookbooks in there too. The library would be a better place for them. At least that way someone could learn something from them, someone who might someday be great. I was fooling myself about my baking abilities if Kira Jones and 2 8-year-olds could make it into the next round of the contest when I couldn't. I started to make a pile of books, but when I picked up the Cupcake Codex, I couldn't bear to part with it. It had given me the inspiration for my lavender cupcakes, the best ones I'd ever made. I flopped on my bed to browse through it one more time. I couldn't pay attention though. My mind kept drifting back to Dad. People's eyes didn't just start flashing purple. And what about his bottomless appetite? Did he need to see a doctor? Had he actually lost his food writer's sense of taste? Or was it just that he didn't want to help me bake anymore? The next thing I knew, I woke to the sound of knocking. I sat up and realized I drooled on my book. Come in, I said. I closed the book and rubbed my eyes. Mom carried in 2 small bowls. She glanced at the pile of books on the floor, then sat at the edge of my bed and handed me a bowl. I thought you could use a treat you didn't have to make yourself. The bowl was warm, and I inhaled the comforting aroma. It was kesari bath, a dessert Mom had learned to make from her mom, who'd learned it from hers in India, and on and on and on for who knew how many generations. It was made with semolina, sugar, milk, and ghee, flavored with saffron and cardamom, and studded with raisins and cashews. I tasted a spoonful of the thick golden pudding. It was perfect. How about everyone else? I didn't want to eat all of it, knowing how much the family loved it, especially Dad. Don't worry, there's plenty more downstairs, but this is for you and me. I sighed and put down the spoon. I can't believe I failed. Again. Mom shook her head and looked at me with her beautiful eyes, so dark they were nearly black. I wish you wouldn't take things so hard, Mimi. I know how much work you've put in, and you can always try again. But what if I fail again? What if I fail at everything, always? Life isn't about succeeding or failing. It's about trying your best and loving what you do and being kind. I'd be so disappointed if you were a snide little snake like that Kira Jones. I don't care how many golden leaves she won. I gasped in surprise. Then, against my will, I started to smile, and giggles bubbled through me until they burst from my mouth. Mom started to laugh with me, and all of a sudden, neither of us could stop. We laughed until tears ran down our cheeks. I couldn't catch my breath, and Mom clutched her stomach. We lay on the bed and took gasping gulps of air. Eventually, we were able to control ourselves and sit up again. Mom looked at me like I was the only person in the whole world. You remind me of myself. But you're so good at everything and you always know what to do. She snorted. You're a much better cook than I was at your age. You wouldn't believe my dreadful attempts when your dad and I were first married. Really? I giggled again. She nodded. I burned more things than I can count, and we didn't have much money, so we had to eat it no matter how bad it was. And I had a real talent for undercooking rice. But I kept at it and read lots of cookbooks and asked both your grandmothers for recipes, and eventually I got better. You're the best cook I know. You're the best baker I know. Mom, don't make stuff up. I mean it. Keep baking, honey, because you love it. Contest or no contest, no one can take that away from you. And if you do try the contest again, I think you'll have a great shot. Thanks. I'm not sure what I want to do. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. Now move over, said Mom. We propped up pillows, and Mom snuggled next to me while we ate. I liked the sweetness of the sugar and ghee, the sunniness of the saffron, and the gently grainy texture of the semolina play in my mouth. It was the perfect combination of sweet and savory, smooth and gritty, fragrant and the tiniest bit bitter. It tasted like home. Thank you guys for being my home.